Dragons. Terrifying monsters, winged beasts. Featured in countless sagas and legends, each time spreading fear and terror.
In the case of the dragon, by now it's all about tyranny and hoarding. But that's not what it was originally about.
Whether in the Song of the Nibelungs or the battle between Hercules and the Hydra, dragons are an integral part of culture and history all over the world.
People believed so strongly in the existence of dragons that they could present real evidence for their existence and then believe it.
From a scientific point of view, dragons are mysterious creatures.
You mentioned that people from the Middle Ages wouldn't have known this creature.
Precisely.
Were dragons modeled after something real?
If you so will, there are little dragons all over the world.
For centuries, they have been the source of fear and fascination. But what is the secret behind the myth of the dragon? The Muro Ryoketsu Shrine, located on the Japanese island of Honshu. It is said a dragon has been living here for over 1,000 years. Legend has it that a 9th century Buddhist monk desperately prayed for rain during a drought, until the dragon, Zenyo Ryo, appears alongside Mount Muro, and the rain starts to pour across the entire land. That is how the dragon god ended the longest drought in ancient Japan. Since this day, he is said to be hiding in this cave. Today, Tatsuya Kanda serves here as a priest. He is sending his prayers directly towards the cave's entrance.
Since this is where the dragon lives, I have never and will never go near or try to enter the cave.
Zenyo Ryo's sanctuary must not be defiled. Therefore, no mortals are allowed to enter it. The Shinto shrine was built to pay tribute to the dragon. Concealed within the forest, protected by nature.
The dragon tradition has been passed down through centuries and thousands of years of ancient lore. That is precisely why I am absolutely convinced that the dragon is living in this cave.
The dragon god Zenyo Ryo symbolizes the ambivalence of the myth. He does not bring suffering and destruction, but rather life-giving rain.
There's something quite primordial about the idea of a dragon. A fearsome creature that could be part of the natural world, but isn't quite, and can do things that are unnatural, like breathe fire and fly. Everybody thinks they know what a dragon is, but depending on where and when you are in the world, it's radically different.
Dragons appear in countless stories and legends told by people around the world, and they often have completely different roles. At times as a demonic monster, and other times as a best friend, or an insurmountable force of nature. Game of Thrones is no exception. This fantasy epic ended in 2019 after 8 seasons and went out as one of the most successful TV series of all times. The prequel, House of the Dragon, picked up where it left off in 2022. This is primarily thanks to the dragons.
Depictions of dragons vary across time and space. Sometimes they have wings, sometimes they don't, sometimes they breathe fire, sometimes they don't. Many accounts are left down to us through oral tradition, hearsay, folklore.
In Klagenfurt on Lake Wörthersee in Austria, people have been recounting one of the old legends since the early Middle Ages. There, they say, those who dare to enter the dark and eerie swamp outside the city never return. A voracious lindworm, supposedly dwelling in the swamp, is to blame. Back then, the Duke's brave servants performed a heroic deed. They managed to lure the dragon out of its cave using a bull fitted with an iron chain and a barb. The plan works. The beast devours the bull and becomes ensnared. Klagenfurt is later founded at the site where the dragon is slayed. This is just one of scores of stories about dragons, lindworms, and snake-like monsters circulating throughout the German-speaking world. Linguist Rene Pöschel wants to find out if there is more to the stories. Can the accounts of the mythical creatures be traced back to animals that have yet to be researched or are thought to be extinct?
For the most part, stories of dragons are transmitted by people, but the image has to have come from somewhere. People describe the world around them using language. They don't usually make up words for things that don't exist. So that means all over the world, people are using the same word for the same thing. That tells me people are actually referring to something that exists.
Using modern scientific methods, Rene compares dragon drawings from around the world. Like the biblical Leviathan, the gigantic sea serpent from the Old Testament, or Quetzalcoatl, the feathered giant snake worshipped as a deity by the Aztecs and the Mayans. The Naga, as they are called, are semi-human serpentine creatures, presumed to be living in India. In China, Long, both a dragon and god of nature, controls the weather and the seasons. By contrast, legends of vicious, fire-breathing lindworms originate in medieval Europe. Is it possible that these legendary figures can be traced back to real-life events? In Klagenfurt, Rene Pöschel is looking for answers. A monument to Klagenfurt's founding legend now stands in the heart of the city. For the cryptozoologist, this is more than just a decoration.
The field of cryptozoology focuses on the space between the natural sciences and the world of unknown senses or sightings. I find the legends about dragons exciting because dragons are one of the oldest animal-like creatures ever to be written about.
Where does the legend of the Klagenfurt lindworm come from? And who told it in the first place? Tour guide Horst Ragusch has been guiding tourists through the city for 20 years. He can't imagine Klagenfurt without the lindworm.
The identity of a town is based on the legends that surround it. Klagenfurt was founded because people did something they had never done before. The whole community, and especially the servants who slayed the dragon. Thus, the city's founding legend is a testament to those who overcame a problem, who overcame their fears.
The residents of Klagenfurt know exactly what the dragon looked like.
Is that what a dragon head typically looks like?
No. The first depictions of dragons found in Klagenfurt's first coat of arms looked a bit like dogs. Here is where the image really changed to become somewhat more reptilian.
That is really important because I read that a typical dragon often looked like a mammal. They had the head of a cat or a dog, sometimes a horse-like body or a horse head. So what I understand from you is that the reptilian image really started in Klagenfurt.
The oldest city seal from 1287 features a lindworm with the head of a dog, the body of a bird, and the tail of a snake. It wasn't until 1593 that this lindworm is depicted with 4 legs instead of 2, and the body and head of a reptile.
developed a kind of instinct for what we think a dragon is, and it's certainly linked to reptiles. We find their appearance strange and also their curious, scaly skin. They don't breathe fire, they don't guard gold, but they often do appear in locations that are, in one way or another, challenging or threatening or dangerous to humans, such as dark caves or swamps.
A dragon dwelling in the swamp that carries off both humans and animals, only to be slain by two brave servants in Klagenfurt? Mere fiction? In Horst Ragusch's eyes, this is a common dragon legend.
Every dragon legend has a similar pattern. The dragon is a symbol of great danger, a threat. And there's always a dragon slayer, a man who seeks to confront the danger. Many of them fail, but in the end, the dragon is always killed, so it's a happy ending.
The story always ends with the hero emerging victorious over the vile lizard. It is a story about courage, how humans overcome forces of nature and chaos by facing the danger.
In some cultures, our stories about dragons center around the dragons fighting off some hero. And I think that really represents this good versus evil contrast, the balance between those two things. And they tend to continue along in these stories because they capture something deep about how we view the world.
And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. Even the Bible features a dragon as the final apocalyptic adversary in the book of John. Does Christian literature hold the key to unlocking the mystery of the dragon? The library of the Strahov Monastery in Prague houses more than 200,000 ancient and medieval works. Librarian Geza Shidlovsky explains why dragons are so often depicted as the root of all evil, as the adversaries of God.
Everything must have a form. All content takes on form, and the form then gives rise to the content. The form of the dragon is evil. In the book of John, the dragon is portrayed as the face of evil that must be defeated. This is because the dragon is trying to draw all believers over to his side to control them.
So even in early Christianity, dragons were the epitome of evil, the personification of the devil. One of the most well-known Christian dragon tales is the story of St. George. A pagan village is haunted repeatedly by a ravenous beast. Just as the king's daughter is about to be sacrificed to the dragon, George the valiant knight steps in and kills him. As a sign of gratitude, the whole village decides to be baptized. A story from the period of Christianization in Europe. It represents the promise that Christianity, together with all its saints, can offer protection from danger.
Dragons represent fear and harm. And maybe this is one reason why they're always associated with the devil and with evil in the Christian tradition. When the other side has dragons, that might incentivize you to join the church's side for protection and safety. So in this way, the church might be using the image of a dragon to persuade people to join the church and advance its political and social mission.
During the Middle Ages, nobody doubted that dragons existed, not even scholars.
About the conflict between elephants and dragons in Africa.
In Naturalis Historia, 1st century Roman scholar Pliny the Elder summarizes virtually everything that is known about the natural history of the ancient world.
This, as far as I know, is the first report to come out in Western culture about dragons and about their battle with the elephants. The dragons come from Mauritania and Ethiopia to kill elephants. Legend has it they coil themselves around their bodies and strangle them.
Dragons are described in detail in several texts, known as the bestiaries. They go by the name of Draco, Latin for dragon. and are portrayed in quite diverse and imaginative ways.
The dragons are all made up of several different animals. They are hybrid creatures. Some have wings, similar to bats. Others, the legs of a lion or an eagle. And the head is usually that of a crocodile or a dog.
Leonardo da Vinci also drew dragons as hybrid creatures with bird-like bodies, bat wings, snake tails, hawk feet, and predatory heads.
Hybrid animals, sometimes called chimera, are extremely common across the world's culture. They're made up of bits and pieces of what's observable in that environment. And this is the reason why they vary across cultures, because they are rooted in what is actually observed in that ecology.
This transforms dragons into more than just winged lizards. They start to mirror reality. However, most dragons are able to do something supernatural. They are able to breathe fire. Sheer fantasy? Or is fire breathing actually possible, at least theoretically speaking? Molecular biologist Martin Moder is convinced it is possible.
To spew fire, you need three things: oxygen, a combustible material, and some kind of ignition spark. All these things are available in nature and in biology.
An experiment is being conducted to show what this might look like. Greenhouse gas methane serves as the medium. In this case, a highly flammable foam is used. In nature, this gas is produced when plant food is digested. For instance, in a cow's stomach. To ignite the gas, Martin uses an electric spark. In doing so, he is replicating an organ found in about 250 species of fish, the electroplax.
The electroplax is an organ used by electric eels to generate surges of electricity. Originally, they were just muscles, but then they evolved to produce a current, an electrical voltage rather than a contraction.
The electroplax consists of electrocytes, thousands of electrical plates connected one after the other, similar to batteries in a flashlight. To stun its prey, the electric eel delivers a jolt of electricity. They can even be dangerous to humans.
With its electroplax, electric eels can generate a current of up to 860 volts.
So, in purely theoretical terms, a plant-eating dragon with an electroplax could actually ignite the methane produced by its own body and spit fire. Right?
The problem with this methane is that it doesn't compress well in a biological organ, which means if I produced a large flame, I would empty all the methane in the organ, and it would take another long day of digestion before I could spit fire again.
But there is another natural material that enables flames to be spread on a large scale: the spores from lycopodium plants. Because they are light in weight and have a fine dispersion, lycopodium spores create a particularly large combustible surface area.
When I blow into this tube, the lycopodium spores disperse, creating a very fine, flammable aerosol.
With the right type of ignition, it can produce a small inferno. Lycopodium is used in pyrotechnics for fire shows at rock concerts, for example. The experiment proves that an animal could theoretically play with fire using natural substances. This is likely not the explanation from a biological perspective.
From an evolutionary point of view, fire-spitting dragons wouldn't make a lot of sense. There are simply more energy-efficient ways for them to kill their prey, and a fire-spewing animal would be constantly burning down its own habitat. That's not ideal either.
So the origins of the fire-breathing dragon don't come from the animal kingdom, but have been conjured up by humans. Since the dawn of time, fire and heat have played a key role throughout human history. Over 1 million years ago, the first humans only had access to fire with the help of naturally occurring wildfires. It was not until 30,000 years ago that our ancestors learned how to make fire themselves. Without fire, it wouldn't be possible to cook food, have protection, or see in the dark. Everything that makes humans human has to do with fire.
On one hand, the fire breathed by dragons is a representation of knowledge. And on the other, it's energy. But this is exactly what dragons represent: the knowledge of how energy takes form. So they become symbols of wisdom, and they become breathers of fire, breathers of knowledge.
It is no wonder that many dragons are said to have had healing properties. In the Song of the Nibelung, the hero, Siegfried, bathes in magic dragon blood that enabled him to be virtually indestructible. Since ancient times, people versed in healing practices and herbal medicine have claimed that dragon bones can be used to treat ailments and wounds. It is alleged that the Romans used dragon bones to treat pain and a variety of injuries. In the 12th century, dragon meat was still used in the Arab world as a remedy for paralysis and colds. In the 12th century, Christian Saint Hildegard von Bingen recommended using dragon's blood to treat gallstones. To this day, Chinese medicinalists believe dragon bones have miraculous properties. In the form of a balm, drops, or tea, they are said to give strength and heal a variety of ailments. The fact that the bones used are fossilized animal bones does not make them any less popular.
While in the Western tradition, dragons tend to be seen as something evil, scary, dangerous, in other cultures that's not the case. So in the Far East, for example, dragons are godlike creatures. They're benevolent, they're kind, they bring good fortune and good luck.
In Japan, rituals paying tribute to the water dragon are an integral part of everyday social life. For 11 years, Tatsuya Kanda has been overseeing the Shinto shrine in the Muro Mountains. His father-in-law was once a priest here, and Kanda will also pass on his duties to a family member as per tradition. It is very important to pay homage to the dragon god.
Those are prayers for a bountiful harvest in the future. If the festival would not be performed anymore, it would be a sign that the village is in a state of critical collapse. If we cannot continue this festival, the very existence of this village would be in danger.
For centuries, rituals honoring dragons have shaped Far Eastern culture. People believe that the dragon, Long in Chinese and Ryu in Japanese, controls the weather and the seasons. Their strong tradition is based on this belief.
There are good times and bad times. But I think the power of nature is something that feels extremely threatening to us. Therefore, it is important to have a sense of reverence every day. Pray to the dragon gods, the kami, show gratitude to them. We pray daily for peace in our hearts. I believe that the kami responds to such a mindset and protects us from natural disasters such as flooding.
Traditions and rituals are a deep part of the human social experience. They help us coordinate, to bond with our groups, to provide meaning and support, and offer a sense of safety in the face of unpredictability.
In Europe, it isn't until the early modern period that dragons go from being a malevolent threat to an ambivalent phenomenon. In Prague, Rena Peschel searches for clues as to why the image of the dragon starts to change during the 15th century.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Following the discovery of the Americas, Europeans became increasingly interested in distant lands. Artifacts from other continents were collected in what was referred to as cabinets of curiosities, also on display at the Strahov Monastery in Prague. This chamber of wonder houses collections from the 17th and 18th century, measuring instruments, alchemical literature, and exotic taxidermy.
And this here is our dragon.
A dragon? It's pretty small.
Yes, true.
It's a baby.
The most unusual object is a dragon, standing at around 70 centimeters tall and a good 400 years old. Could this be real?
We can also call it basilisk.
A basilisk?
Yes, they are mysterious, rare, and relatively unknown, but they belong to the dragon family.
Basilisks are also described in the Old Testament as extremely venomous snakes. Since the Middle Ages, myths have been circulating about their origins. It is said they were spawned by toads on a dung heap, or hatched from a snake's or hen's egg. Their distinguishing feature is the crown on their heads. It is said their gaze turns people into stone and their breath is deadly. This basilisk has 6 wings, 2 feet, and a kind of crown on its head. An animal that does not, and should not, exist in our world.
There are actual figurines in Chambers of Wonder that are dragons. This is because, in many cases, they were believed to exist. If we think about a world where really broad parts of continents were out of reach for many people, and travelers would bring stories over long distances, the idea that a dragon could be living on another continent in another part of the world, that was very possible.
The new sailing routes to the Americas and Asia marked the beginning of a new era for Europe. The Europeans discover the last corners of the earth. Conflicts ensue, but also a lot of interaction and trade between cultures. In particular, European art collectors benefit from the treasures of the New World, which they put on display in those chambers of wonder.
People were looking at an animal they had not seen before in nature. Of course, to us, it is strange that they thought it was a dragon. They knew it was an unusual creature, but they didn't know what exactly.
This dragon does not glide through the air, but across water.
In fact, this specimen was made from the skin of a stingray.
From a stingray?
Yes, it was carefully prepared, preserved, and cut into shape.
In the early modern period, stingrays that end up as bycatch in fishing nets are dried and elaborately processed. The body parts of other animals are added to some of them, creating amazing mythical creatures. British sailors named the figurines Jenny Haniver, borrowed from the French Jeanne d'Anvers, which translates into the girl from Antwerp. This is a clue as to where many of the imaginative animal figurines were made and sold to the sailors at the time.
These kinds of figurines originally came from sailors. They would process the fish and then sell them as souvenirs or as strange, mysterious objects to those who knew nothing about the sea or fish. They made these dragons or basilisks or other fantastic figurines.
Tourists and collectors would buy these unique figurines in order to show them off in high society as a sort of rare exotic treasure. Another Jenny Haniver figurine in the Strahov Chamber of Wonder is said to be a merman.
Here you can see how it was made, because you can see how these parts were connected. They cut through the skin and throat and then boiled the body.
So this is actually empirical evidence that people believed in dragons. It is not evidence that there were real dragons, but rather that people believed in them, and they wanted to believe in them. So as the story goes, sailors would come back from their journeys with these figurines from faraway lands, saying those are dragons. In any case, if people want to believe in something, making things from bones and parts of animals is a very good way to convince them.
The Jenny Hanivers are not real dragons, but provide further evidence that people long believed they existed, and that there is a need for mythical creatures in a world where many things still seem incomprehensible.
Dragon symbolism is as complex as humanity itself. The dragon is depicted differently depending on the people doing the depicting, the things that concern them, their environment, their landscape, their religious beliefs. The dragon is this supernatural, otherworldly, mythical beast that can blend and change according to what people need.
It seems that hardly anyone is bothered by the fact that dragons are so hard to find. That's because dragons apparently like to hide in caves or swamps, or on high mountaintops. It's no wonder that the Alps have long been considered a place of refuge for dragons. According to geologist Georg Friebe, dragon legends in the mountains reveal a great deal about the surrounding environment.
Depending on the legend, dragons have several roles. Sometimes they're the source of danger, other times they warn of dangers to come.
This is especially true for areas with a particularly striking landscape, like when mountain ridges resemble a dragon's spine, or mysterious hills pop up in the landscape, like in Beitzau in Austria. A legend describes the origins of the Jola-Bühl. Legend has it, a poor man once asked a rich farmer for alms here, but the stingy farmer sends the poor man away. Shortly thereafter, the sky grows dark, and an avalanche of stones comes crashing down on the farmhouse.
There's a dragon amidst the moor rubble, and the beggar appears to be riding the dragon. The dragon's tail pushes the rubble, causing the rocks from the moor to fall on the farmhouse. And that is how the hill was formed. From a geological perspective, that's something completely different.
The dragon myth is constantly changing because human beings are natural storytellers, and we're also naturally prone to exaggeration. What could have started off as an encounter with a big snake becomes a battle with a mighty fire-breathing demon. But it also evolves because of the symbolism that gets layered up in these stories. They go from being something that's shared around a campfire into something that represents moral issues, the fight between good and evil. So it is encapsulating all these complex ideas just in this one symbol, the dragon.
So over time, dragons have become the reason behind avalanches and landslides, storm surges and floods, natural catastrophes which humans can neither prevent nor control. And when landslides repeatedly occur throughout the 19th century in the eastern Alps near Bürserberg, people are quick to pinpoint the culprit. An indomitable dragon that devours both livestock and humans. Legend also has it that the dragon too was buried under the rubble.
For people who know nothing about geology, seeing a hill out of place along an open landscape is something that needs to be explained. And that's where dragons enter the picture.
To Georg Friebe, mythical beings are nothing more than misunderstood natural phenomena. A welcome theory for people who seem to be at the mercy of their environment.
Major events such as fire and flood, earthquake and drought are now understandable to us. But for our ancestors, a dragon, a creature of immense power and, more importantly, influence on the natural world, was a perfectly rational explanation. But we must rely on science.
In 2015, historian Julien Douy compared the characteristics of dragons described in legends coming from 23 different cultures. He is in pursuit of the very first dragon, as described in the earliest tales. For this purpose, he uses an evolutionary biology method to reconstruct family trees. Based on his findings, the origin of the myth lies in southern Africa. What did the first ever dragon look like? A hairy horned serpent.
Before we could even stand on 2 feet, we were afraid of snakes. And this fear went with us everywhere we went. And in every dragon story, this fear is there. Fear of what was one of the most scary predators in the world.
So is the dragon myth based solely on the age-old fear of snakes? This theory seems to be confirmed by the origins of its name. The word dragon is derived from drakon, the ancient Greek word for stiff-eyed beast or serpent. Can the tales of dragons be traced back to encounters with snakes? This is what cryptozoologists like Rene Pöschel are trying to find out.
In fact, we received a report a few years ago that someone had seen an unusual reptile in the Alps, in Steinhaus, South Tyrol.
In Steinhaus, Südtirol.
And the way it was described is quite similar to what I would consider to be the most famous cryptid in Europe, the Tatzelwurm.
Auf den Tatzelwurm.
And the Tatzelwurm is a small European dragon.
Ein kleiner Drache Europas.
The name Tatzelwurm literally translates to snake with claws. The creature is described as reptilian, up to 2 meters tall, with a long body, a cat's head, and 2 legs, making it able to pounce on its victims at lightning speed. Tatzelwurms are said to dwell in caves or abandoned tunnels, particularly in the Alps. The people there consider them shy and reserved creatures. They only become aggressive when caught off guard by humans or animals. Eyewitnesses report hearing a high-pitched whistle before seeing the Tatzelwurm and being met with its malevolent gaze. Others tell of a sticky slime or poisonous fumes which the little dragon is said to have excreted. Over the last 150 years, there have been a number of documented sightings. In South Tyrol in particular, the stories are piling up. One of the most recent sightings was said to have taken place along a stream about 5 kilometers from the village of Steinhaus in South Tyrol.
There are hundreds of reports of an unidentified animal in the Alps. So based on the current amount of data, you can actually say, okay, there's got to be something there. Something is definitely behind these stories.
Rene Pöschel wants to get to the bottom of the eyewitness accounts. Together with reptile expert Ivan Plasinger, She is searching for the scene of the uncanny encounter.
Along a stream, you said?
Yeah, exactly. Next to a cliff.
Together with his fellow members of the Hapatone Club, Ivan Plazinger devotes his time to protecting biodiversity and researching endangered reptiles and amphibians. There are lots of these in the Alps. Could mountain lizards and slow worms be behind the Tatzelwurm sightings?
Lizards and reptiles like to hide in ravines around streams and creeks. This here is the perfect spot for them because there are covered areas and open areas.
Yes.
I saw something that looked like a snake on the rock down by the stream. It had eyes like a lizard, was a grayish-brown in color, and a blunt tail that wasn't at all pointy. In total, it was about 1 meter long and had 2 short legs.
As the legend goes, the Tatzelwurm digs deep underground burrows and then lives in them.
So, my question is, are we currently in an area where snakes or lizards normally exhibit such behaviors? Meaning them burrowing dens? And then live in them?
No, there are certainly some natural burrows here, and there are also snakes that do dig their own dens, but not our snakes. The snakes that we have in this area don't do that.
Despite all of this, Ivan Plazinger still believes the Tatzelwurm could be a native snake species.
Imagine a snake catches a fish. It then needs to take it to shore to eat it. This is something a dice snake would do.
Unlike other snake species, the dice snake is an excellent swimmer. It spends a lot of time ambushing its prey in shallow waters. After successfully catching its prey, it drags it ashore, usually horizontally in its mouth.
Imagine the snake is holding the fish in its mouth, like this, and taking its time to eat it. This is exactly what the eyewitness might have seen. Maybe the fish was in its mouth, and this looked as though it had 2 little front legs.
So only a snake with its prey, or a cat-headed dragon on 2 legs after all. Ivan Plazinger is sure that from quite a distance, it would be difficult to tell exactly what one was seeing.
So that cliff over there, it's 5 meters from here. An animal that is that large, perhaps elongated or curled up, can be identified by a trained eye. In other words, by me. But if the animal is further away, near that huge cliff over there, say 10 to 12 meters away, then it would be quite difficult to identify the species, even for me.
The Tyrolean Tatzelwurm. Once again, no evidence of real dragons? Instead, someone's imagination or misperception?
People tend to remember things and attend to things that conform to beliefs that they already have. And so if you really believe dragons exist, you will only pay attention to the evidence that confirms that belief and tend to ignore the evidence that denies it.
But even myths can have a big impact, especially when spread all over the world over thousands of years. Like the myth of the Klagenfurt lindworm, which for the longest time has been dragging people and animals into the swamp. Geologist Claudia Doyen believes that the old legend has shaped the regional identity of the city of Klagenfurt.
These old maps provide evidence in support of the legend and the Lindworm saga. This one dates from 1780 and has Lake Wörthersee over here. Today, this whole area has already become part of the city. At the time, it was still an open field. And here, on the south side of the city, to the east of the lake, there was a large swamp.
A map from the late 18th century shows the area surrounding Lake Wörthersee. Long before the first settlers came here, there used to be a moos, an outdated term for a swamp or bog.
At the time, many people disappeared in this swamp, and so did animals. It was clear that some mystical creature was behind all this. No human being could have done that.
Is this an answer as to how fear turned into legend?
What is real, and what certainly added to the eeriness, is the fog. In Klagenfurt, we have, I don't want to say problems, but we do have a lot of fog.
Fog occurs when it is warm during the day and cold at night. On a cold, clear night, the ground that has been warmed by the day loses heat. The water vapor in the air condenses in the morning, and the fog cover increases. Klagenfurt is located in a valley surrounded by mountains. From autumn on, there's barely any wind and the nights become colder. This causes fog to form in the middle of the Klagenfurt Basin. And this has been happening for 50 million years. Many lost shepherds and wanderers disappeared into the swamp, becoming the dragon's latest victim. This is usually how legends start, closely linked to natural hazards. In 1335, nearly 100 years after the city was founded, the people of Klagenfurt believed they had finally found evidence for the dragon story. They found a skull, which in their eyes can only belong to a lindworm.
They found this huge skull, which was not comparable to any other animal known at the time. Back then, this made everything clear. This was the proof that the dragon existed.
Imagine coming across a giant skull for an animal that you've never seen before. This is where myths enter into the story. It's maybe not that far-fetched to link that skull to an animal like a dragon that you have heard about in a myth, because that gives you some explanation for something that seems inexplicable.
Fossils and bones have been used as evidence of dragons since ancient times. A 6th century BC Greek vase depicts the battle between Hercules and the sea dragon Cato. Cato is represented by a skull fossil. In the 5th century BC, Greek historian Herodotus reported finding skeletons in Egypt that he believed were the remains of dragons. He even made drawings that were used until the Middle Ages as proof that dragons really existed. This is most likely how other mythical monsters from ancient Greece were explained, like the Cyclops from the legend of Ulysses. When a fossilized elephant skull was found on the island of Crete in 2003, researchers assumed such a finding was mistaken in ancient times for the skull of a one-eyed giant. The elephant skull might have been used to prove the one-eyed giant existed because there weren't any known elephants in the region at that time. These are the kind of finds of unknown animal bones that fuel legends about mythical monsters. However, modern science can finally explain the giant mysterious bones. Nowadays, everyone knows that fossils like this one from England are not from a dragon at all. They are the remains of a marine reptile called Ichthyosaurus, which can grow up to 10 meters long. Excavation director Dean Lomax still affectionately calls the find the Rutland sea dragon.
Historically, back during the early 1800s, when the very first ichthyosaurs were being found by the likes of Mary Anning on the Dorset coast, the scientists of the day, they weren't quite sure what to make of them. And you imagine these giant beasts with big teeth and big eyes, some of them having really long necks, the plesiosaurs. They started to refer to them as sea dragons.
Ichthyosaurs lived about 180 million years ago, back when this part of the world was still underwater. Nowadays, researchers are using these types of fossils as a gateway into a long-lost world.
Paleontology was something of an underground science before their ideas were widely accepted. That's because what they proposed was quite extraordinary. They suggested that there was a world that existed before the time of the humans, that was unimaginably old, that was full of the most extraordinary creatures.
As a result, the origins of the dragons are surprisingly diverse, ranging from forces of nature to fear of snakes, mistaken observations, and inexplicable fossils. In 2015, this woolly rhinoceros cub was found in the Siberian tundra. During the last ice age, woolly rhinos roamed the plains of Eurasia, just like the mammoths. They went extinct around 12,000 years ago. If you compare the skull of the woolly rhinoceros with the presumed skull of the Klagenfurt lindworm, it's impossible not to see the striking similarities.
At the time it was found, people didn't have any knowledge about fossilization. They had already discovered many things like large dinosaur bones and said they were from dragons or giants that drowned in the Great Flood.
Could the dragon skull found in Klagenfurt actually be that of a woolly rhinoceros from the Ice Age? The evidence speaks in favor of this. So this wasn't a bloodthirsty monster that ate the people of Klagenfurt alive. Rather, it was an herbivore that lived thousands of years before the city was founded.
On the one hand, paleontology destroyed the myth of dragons as generations of scientists proved that there was this extraordinary world of unimaginable, ferocious creatures. But on the other hand, the fact that it actually already proved that something inconceivable actually existed, then in some respects it does keep alive the dragon myth. Because if we've done it once before, what is there to say we won't find something remarkable again?
There are very few myths that are so complex, disproved, and yet somehow true. The dragon is and remains a part of the history of humanity, and almost all over the world.
Myths carry more truth than history. And sometimes that means they have to be different than history, because they're focused on carrying the insights from our spiritual understandings, from our philosophical discoveries. So the dragon is a real memory of real snakes, but it's also a symbol that carries our own philosophical insights and spiritual understandings.
So from a biological standpoint, dragons are really just figments of our imagination. But from a cultural perspective, they are much more than that. Symbols for the fight of good against evil, emblematic of humankind's longing for magical powers. A reminder of our powerlessness in the face of nature.